Hello, this is Sarah Tuberty, your host from Disarming Disability. Enjoy the following program on Public House Media.
Hey everyone, it's Selena, and you're listening to Stories from Planet Earth. This week we have a very special guest, my mom.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me today to just chat a little bit about your very inspirational and interesting life.
You're so welcome. I'm happy to be here. I'm really excited to be talking about my story, and really it's our story. Hopefully your viewers, or your listeners I should say, can get something and gain something out of it.
Yeah, definitely. I've been saving you for a special day to drag you on the podcast, so I always start off asking my guests where they're from.
Well, I am originally from a little town in Massachusetts. Two towns, really. I was born in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, and then at about 9 years old, we moved over to Leominster, Massachusetts, and it's literally side by side, and was there until I was 19, and Massachusetts is my original home. My parents, your grandma and grandpa, your abuela and abuelo, are from Puerto Rico, so I grew up in a Puerto Rican household, and in Massachusetts, the town that I grew up in, there was a lot of people who were Puerto Rican as well, so I grew up in a little community where pretty much everybody spoke Spanish, and the culture was very, very Puerto Rican where I grew up.
Why do you think that is, that there's so many Puerto Ricans in Fitchburg?
You know, that's a great question. I think that, at one time, a family member, because, New York City was the common, and Florida, were the common areas where Puerto Ricans would go. They'd come to the States and they'd try to find work and things like that to try to make a better life for their families. And I think that once they discovered Massachusetts, which is about 4 hours from New York, they told other family members, and it just kind of started from there. But I know that our family started there back in the, I want to say in the 60s, not too long after Puerto Rico became a territory of the United States, is when a lot of my family members, older family members, started moving into the States and trying to make a better life for their families. And so, I don't know why there's so many of us there in Leominster and Fitchburg, but it was nice growing up into that, in that environment and that culture, and it really allowed me to continue to stay true to my roots, and I'm bilingual, so that helps too, and has helped me along the way.
Yeah, I'm jealous of both of those things because I'm,
Well, you did speak when you were a child, and you just lost it when you came to Colorado.
I know, I had to learn English so fast. So hopefully one day I can regain my Spanish-speaking skills. I can understand it pretty well. It's just the speaking and the conjugating that I'm working on.
You'll get there.
So, just to be the center of attention, let's talk a little bit about me and how I came into your life.
Well, you came into my life, although I love and adore you, very unexpectedly. So I grew up, my abuelo, your abuelo, my dad, was very strict when I was growing up. And I always remember, I understand now why he was like that, and I know that it came from a place of love and a place of wanting to protect me. But it really kept me very naive about the world. And so I wasn't allowed to do a whole lot or anything like that. So your dad was my actual very first real boyfriend. And so we were kids, and we decided, we made decisions that a lot of kids do around that time when they're in love and all of these things. And so I ended up getting pregnant. So we were extremely shocked by that, and it was a life-changing event. And it was very difficult at first because in my family, you just don't do that until you get married. It was one of those things where, we weren't planning it, but it happened, and you just kind of have to deal with what comes your way. And of course, I love you, so I love my baby. So it was a blessing, but it was very difficult at first. My dad was extremely mad at me. There were family members who were really upset with me, and it was a hard thing to deal with as an 18-year-old young girl. I did graduate high school soon after I found out that I was pregnant, so that was good. And and I think that even though I was young, that I became the best mom that I could be, being so young.
Yeah, I think you did a pretty good job.
And it's funny because before I found out that you were coming into my life, I actually was about to sign up to join the U.S. military, the Army. And I had taken my ASVAB test. I had talked to a recruiter. I was ready to go. And I think that it came out of a place of me wanting to just spread my wings, because I had been kind of on lockdown in my house for so long. Again, God bless Abuelo. I know that his intention was to protect me, but I think that I felt trapped, and I wanted to spread my wings. And so I wanted to join the military, but obviously God had different plans for me, and I had you instead, and I'm grateful for that, because you've been one of the best things that have ever happened in my life, along with your brother and sister, and I wouldn't change that for the world.
Thanks, Mom. So what do you think was the most challenging part about having a child so young?
Goodness, I think that the fact that I wasn't living at home anymore, as you know, my dad was so mad at me that he told me I was not allowed to stay in the house. And so not being able to have the support of your mom with your first baby. I mean, Abuela did support me in a way. She was still upset, but she was still in my life at the time. She was still talking to me, but she wasn't able to be there for me in the way she wanted to because of the situation we were in. And so it was kind of almost a forced situation where I had to go live with your dad and his parents. And I was not, I didn't know them very well. And so that was extremely challenging. Here I am, an 18-year-old young girl, still a kid myself almost, pregnant, having all of these morning sickness issues, and I'm living in a household where I hardly know your dad's parents, and I'm very grateful for them taking me in, because they could have easily said no, you're not allowed to stay here, and they didn't. But that was really rough, because I wanted my mom, and Mom couldn't be there for me as much as she wanted to. So I had a lot of morning sickness. I think I cried every day while I was pregnant, just because I was so sad about the situation with my parents and my dad, and that whole thing. So I felt like I disappointed them, and that was extremely hard for me.
Yeah. If you could go back, what advice would you give yourself, like, in that situation, or would you do anything differently?
Oh gosh, I don't think I would do anything differently, honestly, because all of that shaped who I am today. The good, the bad, the ugly, the fun, the all that I went through shape who I am today. I think the only thing I would have probably done a little differently is not be so hard on myself, because I have always been my worst critic, my worst enemy, and always so worried about everyone else at the cost and the expense of my own feelings and my own way of dealing with things. And so just to love on myself a little bit more, to love me a little bit more, and to show myself a little grace. I think that's what I would have done a little differently.
Mm-hmm. So tell me how we ended up in Colorado.
So as time went along, your dad ended up joining the military. And so we ended up moving with his parents to Texas because his dad was also military. And from Texas, your dad joined the military. And then the very first year that he got his assignment after boot camp and training and all of that, he was sent to Korea. And so during that year that he was going to be in Korea, I did not want to stay in Texas. And so at this point in time, Abuelo and Abuela were in Puerto Rico. They had bought a house back in Puerto Rico. They went back there to live and with your uncles. And Abuela asked, she said, why don't you come live with us? By this time, my dad was already talking to me. And as a matter of fact, when he saw you in the hospital room, your grandpa, your abuelo, he actually asked me to forgive him for not talking to me while I was pregnant. And it was, things changed from there. And so then he was super supportive after that. But by this time they had went back to Puerto Rico, and they told me that, I can go live with them while your dad was in Korea. So went to live in Puerto Rico with you. And you were about 2 and 3 years old around that time. And after your dad's year in Korea, he was informed that he was going to be stationed in Colorado. And I said, okay, well, to Colorado we go. And that was in 1998. And we've been here ever since then. Mm-hmm. It's my home now. I love Colorado. And I don't see myself ever leaving Colorado. It's home now for me, so.
Yeah. Did you expect it to be, the place you ended up forever whenever you first got here?
I really didn't, because I didn't know what to expect with your dad joining the military. I wasn't sure if he was going to stay in for the long haul or if he was going to just do this first enlistment. I wasn't sure. I assumed that Colorado was going to be this extremely cold, freezing place. And yeah, we have those days and all that, but definitely not as cold as I thought, like where I grew up in Massachusetts. So love the mountains here. I love all the outdoor stuff that you get to do here. It's just home now. It's an awesome place to live.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I love Colorado so much. I'm glad that Dad didn't get stationed in Oklahoma, and that's where we ended up forever. So once you got here, we probably lived on base for 2 years?
Yeah, we did live on post for a couple of years. I don't remember exactly how long, but it was at least a couple of years, because just a year later we had, another baby, and that's your sister, Cynthia, and she was born in 99, and we were still on post around that time. And after that, your dad decided to get out of the military, and he was not happy with it, and I was not happy with it, and we just decided that it wasn't for us anymore. And so he ended up getting out of the military, and we moved off base at that moment.
Mm-hmm. And then not long after, you guys ended up getting a divorce.
Right. So things quickly began to crumble. I think that we were just so immature we did not know how to do conflict, and we butt heads a lot, and we argued a lot, and it was just a not a great situation. And then we did end up ultimately splitting up, and then things really got very chaotic after that.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what unfolded after that.
Well, I think that after that happened, I felt like a failure. I didn't know what to think. I was confused about a lot of things at the time. And I was like, okay, well, now I have to get a full-time job, because I have to be able to provide for my girls. And I started working around that time at some place here, and we were making plans to separate and all that, or to divorce and all that stuff. And then time passed, and we ended up splitting up and all that good stuff, and not good stuff, but and so I started working at this place, and semiconductor place, full time. And actually I started working there prior to us completely splitting up. And as time went on, I met this guy there, and he was very nice, just a really charming guy, always trying to be super sweet to me. And I kind of felt like he was trying to flirt with me and things like that. And I made it clear that I, was not even divorced, that I'm going through a divorce, and I really wasn't looking for a relationship, that I really needed to be by myself. And this man, seemed like he respected that, but he just was extremely persistent in a not so direct way, if that makes sense. And so he just said, okay, well, yeah, we can be friends. I'm not saying you need to be anything else. Let's just be friends. And I'm like, well, that's nice, And so things unfolded from there. Then he would bring me gifts to work, and he would be waiting for me outside when I'd get to work, and just sweet things. Hey, I made some tacos. I wanted you to taste these. And I thought, okay, harmless, whatever. And so those things continued. And then he ended up like bringing gifts for you girls and things like that. And it was one of those things where it just kind of turned into, wow, I think I'm starting to like this guy. He's so sweet. And, it just felt like, oh wow, somebody really likes me, like this guy really likes me. And so one thing led to another, and then we ended up starting dating, and then we married just short of a year after that. And so I remember him saying, when we were starting to date, which I think looking back now was kind of a clue. I remember him saying, oh, you're going to marry me. You're going to marry me. And I would tell him, no, I'm not. I just divorced. Like, there's no way I'm going to marry you. And he was right. I mean, I ended up, falling in love with this man, or so I thought. And I ended up marrying him just short of a year after that. And what I didn't realize is that would have been my biggest mistake. The biggest mistake I've made in my life. Because he ended up not being the person who he claimed to be, or who he acted like he was during the time that we were dating.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so when did things start to become clear to you that this wasn't turning out the way that, like you'd wanted to?
That's a difficult question, because I don't know that it was ever clear until the end. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of, those things that make you go, You know what I mean? Those subtle little feelings, gut feelings that you get that make you feel like something's not right. I had many of those feelings throughout the marriage. Things started to change after we were married. He waited until after we were married to kind of start showing that controlling and manipulative side of him, but it was still subtle. It wasn't in my face. And those kind of things were the things where I was like, okay, this is weird, but maybe I'm just overreacting. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just sensitive, those kinds of things. And I began to rationalize a lot of the behaviors when really it was my gut telling me this is not a safe situation. And I didn't really know how to pay attention to my gut at the time. I had no idea. I had gone through some trauma as a child, and I wasn't sure if maybe that's why I was feeling the paranoia that I felt I was feeling. But I was extremely insecure. That was something that I had to deal with, that I knew I had an issue with. And I think that he knew that. I think he knew, and he can sense my insecurities, and he took advantage of that. And definitely a lot of gaslighting, where, I don't know if your listeners are familiar with that term, but gaslighting is where, after somebody grooms you to be basically their victim, they almost make you feel like you're crazy. They say things and do things that make you question your own psyche. It makes you feel like, wow, what's wrong with me? And so those kinds of things, that manipulation began to happen. And so it wasn't really clear, and I think we can go into this as we continue to tell our story, but it wasn't really clear until later on when, after he ended up going to jail, and we can talk a little bit about that later on, but it wasn't really clear, I guess, until after that. And so I knew that it wasn't a good thing. I knew that. But in my mind, I try to rationalize it thinking, maybe we just need some help. Maybe we can go to counseling. Maybe these are things that I can talk to him about and we can work out. Maybe this is just a normal thing that marriages go through. Because remember, I was very young when you and your dad, with me and your dad, I didn't know how to do marriage and life. But this was different. This was not, he wasn't directly mean to me or anything like that. He never called me names. In fact, he did the opposite of what I thought was abusive at the time, because I'd always told him before, I'm like, in a marriage, you should do 50-50, those kinds of things. That, if I work and you work, you should be able to help me around the house. And so he did those things. He helped me around the house. He cooked for me. He cleaned for me. He did all of those things. Never called me names. But there was just a lot of manipulation. A lot of psychological manipulation that I didn't realize was that until later on.
Right. Yeah. Because I suppose that is something that when it comes to the psychological abuse, it's easy to dismiss. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why a lot of people will find themselves in those situations, because you can just say, oh, maybe I'm just overreacting. Yeah. Oh, this is an abuse. He's not hit me, or they haven't hit me. So exactly, it's easy to dismiss your own feelings and dismiss your gut feeling.
Definitely. And I did a lot of that. I did a lot of, I rationalized. And at the time, I didn't know what abuse was. I honestly had no idea what, I wasn't really educated on domestic violence or domestic abuse, any of that. And so I just thought it was just a bad, that we were having problems and we needed to work on them. And so that was kind of, at the very beginning, and then it continued throughout our marriage, and then it went into different areas of our marriage. And that's when I really began to think, okay, there's something not right here. And, you know, as difficult as it is for me to say this in front of you, he began to display a lot of sexual abusive behaviors, and he would do a lot of that, and it would make me feel extremely dirty and extremely just feeling like I wasn't worth anything at all. And that ended up creating a lot of more trauma for me, because it brought up a lot of those memories of when I was a child and I was sexually abused as a child. So that triggered a lot of those memories for me. And so, you know, this was something that was really difficult for me, and I gained the courage to talk to him about that one time, and he was extremely receptive, and he actually even cried with me when I was crying, saying, when you do these things, it triggers these things in me, and I've never told anybody this, but this is what happened to me as a child, and when you do these things, this is how it makes me feel. And I would tell him those things, and he cried with me, and he hugged me, and then he would say, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize that, I promise I won't do that again. And so I thought, wow, okay, that was good. See, this worked. And things would be good for 2 weeks, and then he would start over again. And this time he would use that as a manipulation tactic. And he would tell me things such as, oh, well, you're the one with the issues because you've never dealt with your issue. And why do I have to suffer for what happened to you? And so he began to manipulate me in that way. And so things just escalated from there and got worse. The manipulation got worse and worse and worse. Until ultimately it was certain at that point, towards the end of that marriage, that this is not okay. I know that I had some really close friends who began to take note of the change in my behavior, because I was always very chippery and happy, and they noticed that I wasn't that anymore. They noticed when he would call me at work and not leave me alone, and if I wouldn't answer him, he'd get mad at me, and they'd notice when I'd come to work without being, without sleep, sleep deprived, because he'd keep me up all night arguing with me and threatening suicide because I would mention separation. He would threaten suicide every single time. And so these things continued to happen and happen and happen. And one of my friends said, what's going on? And when I explained to her what was going on, she said, that's abuse. And I was like, no, he's not hitting me. No, he's not hitting me. It's just, we're just having issues. And she said, no, that is a sign of domestic abuse. And so she was the very first person to validate me for that, validate that I was in an abusive situation. But then I was extremely, I didn't want anybody to know. I was extremely embarrassed by it. I was like, no, I'll handle it. I'll take care of this. I can take care of this on my own. And so I chose to kind of just remain silent about that. Only she kind of knew what was going on. And that was until things continued to escalate until just one defining moment. I said, no more. I can't do this anymore. And that moment was when you, Selena, came to me very bravely at, 10 years old. You were Alex's age. Alex is Selena's little brother, my son. He's 10 now. Well, Selena was 10 years old at the time when she came to me. And you came to me and you said, Mom, I'm really scared for you. And you were crying, and I said, what's going on? And you said, I'm afraid that he's going to hurt you. And I didn't know what to say. I'm like, Mama, why do you feel that way? And then you proceeded to tell me that you would hear us argue at night, that you would stay awake because you wanted to make sure that your mommy was sleeping so that if he hurt me, that you could call 911 and you would hold the phone until you knew that I was sleeping. So here you were, my poor baby, weren't even sleeping until you knew that I was. So you were getting less sleep than I was, just because you wanted to protect your mommy. And that was like a dagger to my heart. I could not believe what I was hearing. I didn't even realize that you knew what was going on. And that was the defining moment for me. That's when I said, no, I cannot allow my baby girls to think that this is okay, to think that this is acceptable, that this is healthy. And I made a decision from then that I wasn't going to stay in that marriage. And that turned into more chaos, as you know. Long story short, we ended up separating for a brief time. I had kicked him out a couple times before, and I'd take him right back. And you probably don't even remember how many times he'd leave. He would stay with his mom or his brother. And I'd take him back after he'd cry to me and apologize. And we did this often. And so this time, after an argument, I asked him to leave, and he left like he always did. And I told him I just needed some time. And but this time I was serious, and this time I was not going to take him back. When he began to recognize that I was serious this time, then he was angry. He became angrier than I've ever experienced him to be before. And then he, at this point, escalated his threats. He began to stalk me. He began to just threaten all kinds of things, threaten my job. He hacked into my email for my job at the time, trying to get me into trouble so that I can lose my job. He even threatened that he would tell where I worked, which I'll share that here soon, but that I was abusive towards him. He's like, and he would say things like, I know that you'll get fired if I tell them that you hit me. And so he threatened my job. He threatened to tell my family what happened to me as a child, which was, something that horrified me, because I didn't want them to know at the time, because this was a very close family member that did this to me as a child. So he threatened all kinds of things, and I had to get a restraining order. Now, the first restraining order that I had attempted to go for was denied, unfortunately, which was extremely humiliating because I was in a courtroom full of people. And I felt unvalidated when the female magistrate sat there and said, oh, well, it sounds like you just are having marital problems. But this time, after he threatened you over the phone, because he attempted to contact you after he couldn't contact me anymore, I called the police and filed a report, and then I went and got a restraining order, and this time it was approved. And so a week after, for a week I didn't hear anything at all, and I thought, thank God he's out of my life. He's gonna leave us alone. But what I didn't realize is that he was planning what his move would be. His next move would be. And so, as you and I know, June 26, 2006, he caught me in front of our own home. He was hiding underneath the steps in front of the house. He had been hiding there for a couple hours, waiting for me to come home from work, 10:30 at night, and he kidnapped me at gunpoint and ended up assaulting me sexually and in other ways. And he was definitely, all I could see was just the rage. He was angry, and the evil just coming out of his eyes. It was just oozing out of him. I'd never seen him like that before. I mean, he'd been manipulative and all of those things, but this time he really showed his true colors. And I kept begging him, please, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And all I could do was cry. I was paralyzed. I was emotionally and psychologically paralyzed. I could not move. I could not believe what was happening to me. And by the grace of God, I was able to escape that night. And I know that at the same time that I was going through that, you and your abuela, who at this point was living with us, were searching for me because I had gone missing. I had parked in front of the house, and that's where he caught me, in front of the house. And abuela noticed that my car was there, but I didn't come inside. And so that's when you guys started searching and calling the police and calling friends and trying to look for where I was, all while I was dealing with, with him kidnapping me and at gunpoint and all of that. But that was a very, very tough situation. I truly believe that he was going to kill me and that he would turn around and kill himself. He took me to this little town called Boone, Colorado, and it's literally in the boonies, just like the name, in the middle of some train tracks. Nothing out there. There was absolutely nothing out there. And I thought, he's going to kill me. He's going to kill me, and then he's going to kill himself. And so I began to kind of think through, if he's going to kill me, this is all going through my mind as he's doing what he's doing. And I'm thinking, I'm going to leave evidence. I'm going to leave evidence. If he's going to take my life, he's going to pay for it unless he kills himself. But if he doesn't kill himself, he's going to pay for this. And so I made sure that I left, evidence behind of that. One of the examples was some Taco Bell napkins that were laying on the floorboard of the truck, of the car. I made sure to wipe myself with that and then throw them on the ground so that somebody can find them. But long story short, at that time, I was able to escape just because... Oh, hold on. I messed that up. Okay, so long story short, after he did what he did to me, he began to cry, and he began to tell me that he loved me, and that this is, literally like insanity. He was saying things like, do you see what you make me do? Do you see what I have to do to prove to you that I love you? This is what you drive me to do. Can't you see I can't live without you? And he was crying and just, I just couldn't believe my eyes. And I was so angry and hurt and just completely shocked by how he was acting. It was just not, it was something that just normal people don't do that. Sociopathic people do that. And I thought, okay, this is my opportunity to manipulate him. And so I played off of it. And I said, I understand. I'm so sorry that I ever made you do this. And I just played along. I played along. And that was how I knew how to survive that night. And I got him to believe that I was going to take him back, even though I knew, heck no, I would never take him back. And I actually convinced him to take me I told him, just take me home. He wasn't comfortable with that because he said he knew the police were looking for us because they had been calling our phones, which he took from me. And he wasn't answering. He wouldn't allow me to answer it because I kept begging him, can I just at least talk to my mom? Because she's probably worried sick. She's probably so worried about me. I just want her to know that I'm okay. And he wouldn't let me do it. And so he was really nervous about that whole thing. And, the cops looking for us. So they're searching for us. What are we going to tell them? And I just kept begging him, I'll let them know that I went with you willfully. Please just take me home. Please just take me home. He didn't want to take me home, but he agreed to take me to a convenience store, which was off of Highway 50. And so he took me into the store. Well, he didn't let me go in, no, I take that back. So he took me to the store. It was probably like 12:30 at night or something like that. And we were the only people there. And we go into the store, and he made me go in because he didn't want me to stay outside. And I asked, can I use the bathroom, please? I feel like I need to throw up. And so after he inspects the bathroom, I go in there. And I close the door and I just start sobbing. And I turn on the faucet and I just start sobbing and sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And I'm just desperate. I need to get away from this guy. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I need to get away from him. And so I look in the mirror and I just couldn't believe what I was looking at. I was like, I never would have imagined being in this place right now. And I ended up praying, and I hadn't prayed for years. In fact, I just kind of, I never thought about God for a long time. And in that moment, I had to go to what I knew that could help me, and I cried out to God that night. And then something in me said, no, you will get away from this guy. You will not die. And I reasoned with God. I said, Lord, I know that this is not your plan for me, that this was never your plan for me. And I know that my babies need me, and you can't take me. And I told God that. You can't take me. I'm not ready to go. And I said, if you get me out of this, I promise you I will serve you for the rest of my life, and I will help women until the day I die, until my last breath. And then instantly, I just felt peace in that moment. I cannot explain to you that peace that I felt, even though I was in a very crappy situation. I just knew I'd be okay. And I just splashed my face, rinsed it off, and I felt this just covering over me. And this just, I don't know that I've ever experienced that ever before, but it was just like this warm blanket of love over me. And I knew I'd be okay. And so I get out of the bathroom. He's asking me if I'm okay, and I'm telling him no. I feel like puking. I was gagging in the bathroom, that kind of thing. And so he ends up buying me a bottle of Propel grape drink and a candy bar. We go out, we pay, we get into the car or into the truck. He turns it on. I take a swig of the Propel, and I'm gagging again. I'm feeling like I want to puke. And he's patting me. Patting my back, saying, oh, honey, baby, are you okay? Are you okay? Almost like he cares. And I told him, no, I'm not. I feel like I'm going to pass out. Which I really did. I was just exaggerating it a little bit more. And I told him I need water. I can't drink this flavored stuff. I need real water. And he says, okay, well, let's go get you some water. And I said, I can't get out of the truck because I will pass out. I will literally pass out if I step out of this truck. And so he looked at me dead center, like dead in the eyes. And it's almost like he reverted back to that evil one again. And he says, you're not going to try anything stupid, are you? And I said, no, I'm not. I'm literally feeling sick. I just need water. And he said, swear on your daughters. And he knew I hated doing that. But I needed to survive this. So I said, I swear on my daughters, I need some water. I'm not going to try anything stupid. So he made it a point to take the phones that he put in the center console with him. But he made one very, very, very big mistake. And he left the keys in the ignition. And left the car on, the truck on. When he got out of the truck and went into the convenience store, as soon as he cleared that door to the convenience store, I hopped over. And this is with a sprained ankle too, because I didn't mention earlier I had a sprained ankle at the time as well. I hopped into the driver's seat, didn't even take the time to adjust the seat. I'm 5'4". He's like 6'2", 6'3", And so I could barely touch the gas pedal and the brakes with the tips of my feet. Barely. But I put it in reverse. And the steering wheel was actually like at my nose. So I can only literally see the slightly over the dashboard. But I didn't care. My goal was to get away. So I put it in reverse and reversed and then went into drive. And as soon as I went into drive, I see him staring through the convenience store, almost shocked and angry. And I took off from there. Knew I needed to get to you guys. I had no idea where I was at, but I knew Highway 50 connected to I-25, and I needed to get home to you guys into safety. I knew the cops would be there, the police. I knew that I would be safe if I just went home. So I went literally like a maniac, driving hardly. I don't even know how I got home. I felt like it was just an outer body experience. I don't know how I got home. I couldn't hardly see over the steering wheel. I couldn't hardly reach the pedals. I just knew I needed to get home. And I just kept saying, oh my God, help me, help me, help me. Get me home, get me home, get me home. And all I could think about was my family, you girls, and Mom and Dad. And I knew I needed to get home. And so I just kept going and kept going and kept going, and then all of a sudden I was like, okay, I'm gonna be okay, I'm gonna be okay. I swear to you that I think that I had guardian angels there that night. Literally. I don't know how I did it. There's no way a person in my state could have driven that vehicle. I don't even remember how I got there, but I got there to safety. And lo and behold, I get to the neighborhood and the police have it blocked off and they were looking for me, and I was able to hug you guys and tell you guys that I was okay. And then I was able to give my statement, and that night police were stuck around to make sure everybody was safe, and they caught him the next day hiding in his dad's kitchen cupboard from the police. And he has been in jail and in prison ever since, and he will be there for the rest of his life where he deserves to be.
Yeah, every time I hear you tell that story, it's just as emotional as, going through it. Like, the pain isn't there, but it's just...
Yeah. It's surreal.
It's surreal. And, thank you for taking some time to be on the podcast to talk about that, because it is just, like, such a defining moment, I think, for you and for me and Cynthia and our whole family. And it took so long, I think, for all of us to walk away from that and recover and, like, even thrive.
Yes. And that's the key, because when you go through stuff like that, one thing's to survive it, right? We all want to survive, and we all want to help others survive, but there's an aftermath that happens. There's the trauma. There's the work that needs to be done after you go through that, because you don't want to just simply survive. You want to be able to thrive. You want to be able to experience life with joy and experience it fully without allowing that trauma to get in the way of who you're really meant to be. And that takes a lot of work, and I don't know if it's necessarily work, but it takes time, and you have to be able to want that healing. You have to make a choice at some point that you no longer want to give that power to that trauma anymore, or to that person that hurt you, and you want to regain that power. And I think that gave me strength to say, I'm not going to let him win. I'm not going to be a prisoner for the rest of my life. I'm going to get through this. I'm going to get through this, and I'm going to make sure that my daughters witness that so they too know that they can get through this. Because it was tough for all of us. You know, there was a lot that happened behind the scenes that you know, that we all had to heal from.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot, you and Cynthia, you know, and it wasn't just me. He did so much damage to this family. But damn it, he didn't win. And damn it, we put him away. And we faced him in court. You faced him in court at 11 years old, and you looked him straight dead in the eye. Bravely, courageously. And you told him that you wanted him behind bars forever. You told the judge that, and that was the most courageous thing. That's why I call you my hero. That gave me strength. And so I think that from then on, it's been an amazing journey. Not an easy one. It has not been easy. For anyone who says it's easy, it's not. But it's possible. It's possible for anyone who's experienced trauma to heal and to live joyfully and to experience peace and to be free. To be free of all of that baggage and all of those wounds, those emotional wounds, because I stand here and I can tell you that I don't feel that anymore. I don't feel the hurt anymore. I cry now, and it's to explain it, it's almost like tears of joy. You know, I think I hurt more for, you know, what you girls went through than anything else. Like that, I think, is just the hardest thing for me to ever think about is the pain that you guys went through. You know, but I'm also so grateful that you know, you girls have been able to also take this and learn and grow and not allow it to define you. You've not allowed this to define you, and I'm so proud of you girls, because, you know, that's exactly what I feared, is that it would define you. And I knew I needed to do that work in me in order for that to be real for you guys. You know what I mean? And there's still work to do, I understand, you know, like with you girls especially, like you're going through all that, but you guys have gone so far in that healing, and you're going to continue to get there, but and ultimately receive that full freedom. But I am free. Like, I don't have the PTSD anymore. I don't have the anxiety anymore. I don't have that lack of self-love like I used to have. I actually love myself now. You know, do I judge myself every once in a while? Yeah, we all do. But I truly and genuinely love myself now, because I know who I am now. I know who God created me to be. Growing up, I thought that I was not good enough for God. And I recognized that it had nothing to do with that. That it wasn't about me earning love. That it was just me receiving love. And when I learned that I could just receive His love regardless of who I was, regardless of mistakes I've made, regardless of what had been done to me, then it helped me love myself even more. So healing can take place for anyone who's gone through this. Anyone who is willing to actually receive that.
Yeah. I think that's the message I want this particular episode to carry, is that as hard as it is, whenever you go through something like this, you can find peace on the other side.
Yes.
And I just hope that if there's anybody out there that is dealing with trauma, or, you know, working through anxieties or PTSD, that you can take this and, you know, believe that it's possible for you too.
Yes, because it is. If I can heal, anyone can, because I'm not special. And we deserve that. We deserve that. We weren't created. Our original purpose was not for us to live with all these issues and this brokenness that we have in this world. That was not the original plan, but there's evil out there. There's evil out there. But we overcome evil with good. And how much more can we overcome evil by healing and saying, I'm not going to allow you to define me? When you can look at the face of evil and say, no, you do not define me. You will not steal my joy. And you take that good, you take that, and then you help others with it. And then it's such an amazing thing to see your story, even though your story may be ugly, your story may be hurtful, your story may be traumatic. It's amazing to see the good, believe it or not, that can come from that. And there's so much good that came from our story, that we were able to turn it around and use it for the good of others and to help others. I mean, I can't even explain to you how amazingly God used this story to help other people. Hundreds and hundreds of stories that came, you know, good things that came out of this, and hundreds of people that we have helped along the way because of what happened, because of us speaking out and the awareness that took place and all of that. So just trust that good, even though it may feel so dark in the moment, that good can come out of it. There's this favorite scripture of mine in Genesis 50:20 where it says, you intended to do me harm, to do evil on me, but God intended it for good. So not saying that God made that happen to you, basically saying that, yeah, although evil happened to you, God turned it into good. God can make a good story out of it. He can make good out of your bad story, out of your traumatic stories, out of anything that happens to you. He can turn it around, and it's not wasted. It's not ever wasted. And so believing that every tear, every hurt, every wound, believing that you can turn that into something beautiful, that beauty from ashes. There's hope in that. There's hope in that. And I know that we've done that in our lives. And I know that anybody who's willing to do that is able to do that as well.
Yeah. I think that is a good place to sign off. Thank you so much for talking with me and sharing your story. Although you've done it thousands of times by now, it's, you know, I'm honored that you shared on my podcast as well.
Thank you. I'm so proud of you for all that you're doing, and I know that you're going to continue to do amazing things to help so many people. I'm very proud of you. I love you.
I love you too.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Stories from Planet Earth. If you have some time, leave us a review, and be sure to subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts. Find us on Instagram at SFPE Podcast. I'll talk to you next week.